Back at it, House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 8. And things are moving along the same course as they have been. The episode starts off in Driftmark, which is where much of the action, much of the story in the previous episode took place. As this episode opens up, further complicating matters is that Corlys Velaryon has been away at sea for, I believe it's 6 years at that point. Him and his crew got into a situation on the sea and he was very seriously injured. What remains to be seen is, did he survive? Is he still out there somewhere? Will he ever return? But given the seriousness of this, a decision has to be made as far as, or rather, his brother pushes for a decision to be made with regards to who picks up the mantle at Driftmark. You know, who in Corlys's space will rule over Driftmark, will become the head of House Velaryon. Because it's unclear, how much longer will Corlys be gone, right? The House Velaryon is very powerful. They have a lot of wealth. They pretty much command a fleet of ships, which gives the Seven Kingdoms its might at sea, right? Whereas you can think of it as that the Targaryens rule the sky and to some degree also rule the land, but they're not really a seafaring type people. That's more the Velaryons. And so it's important to know who is going to have control of this fleet as, number one, just in case, right? Because you have drama brewing in the Stepstones. It's been just a constant place where fighting is just constantly taking place, and it's important to have someone at the ready in control of the Valyrian fleets in the event that full-on war breaks out again. Succession typically passes through the male line. And so in having Laenor as a son, Laenor by default would have been his heir. Through this marriage between Rhaenyra and Laenor, you have it where, by the king's decree, Rhaenyra is heir to the Iron Throne and would then become head of House Targaryen. On the other side, you then have Laenor, who, as Corlys's firstborn son, would be heir to Driftmark. And so whatever children they produce, the succession would then continue on that way. Now, because Rhaenyra is still alive, whenever Viserys passes on, theoretically she should be next in line to that throne. But because Laenor, for all intents and purposes, is dead, the succession would move on to his children. He has 2 sons, which would be Rhaenyra's 2 children. Now, at issue, this is what complicates matters with regards to the succession plan. The belief, rumor, whatever you want to call it, that Rhaenyra's sons that she had with Laenor were not Laenor's children, it then calls into question how valid their claim is to the Driftmark throne. But have to now journey to King's Landing to petition the king, to petition Viserys. And arriving at King's Landing, the welcome that guests receive should really be determined and defined by their rank and station. And you have to think about it that Rhaenyra has been named as the king's heir, yet the welcome that they receive is a little bit lackluster. If you recall, when they're aware of the brewing problems with regards to Driftmark. And so Alicent's intention is to meet with Rhaenyra, but she's not there to meet her at the dock. So while she does leave the council meeting or cut short her presence at the council meeting to go and meet with Rhaenyra to welcome Rhaenyra and Daemon, she's actually sidetracked by some drama with her son. At the same time, Rhaenyra and Daemon visit with Viserys. It's been some time since they've seen each other, and it's like every time you see this guy, he's looking more and more like Skeletor. Like, this guy just looks decrepit. You know, like his teeth are a mess. Like, not even these, like, missing teeth. It's like, they haven't fallen out, but they look like cigarette ash. And it's like between that and like his face is falling apart. He's got like these wounds and whatnot. His nails are all raggedy looking. Like, this man looks like a walking corpse. And it's like, this is like the slowest death ever because this man has been dying for like north of 20 years now. So, Rhaenyra and Daemon are like visibly shaken up to see him in this condition. Like, he looked terrible last episode. He looks progressively terrible each episode, but it's like now he's like in bed. He can't even really get up to attend council meetings or anything like that, which is why Alicent and Hightower are pretty much ruling in his place. And this is recognized by everyone else that Viserys is really just now king in name, but Alicent and her father are the ones that are really ruling over the Seven Kingdoms. And this was kind of the concern that Laenor expressed to Rhaenyra, that with her leaving King's Landing, it would leave her father vulnerable, if you want to call it that, but also open to Alicent kind of influencing him, right? And we've seen that take place, but here even you see that it's gone past just influence to where she's now pretty much ruling in his place. And it just seems like a shady setup. You know, like he starts, I think, like coughing or something like that, or having some kind of an attack of sorts, if it's pain or whatever it is that's going on. And he calls for his tea, which Daemon hands to him. He calms down. And in handing the cup back to Daemon, like, he smells it and it's milk of the poppy. Where within this world, milk of the poppy seems like a kind of, poppy seeds, I would think it's like opium. That's the way that I've always imagined it. And it's used as like a pain reliever, but it seems like it can also be like a drug. And so it's like, you look at this where like this guy looks like he is not just knocking at death's door, but like the door is open, he's crossed the threshold, but it's still just hanging around. And it's like, you think of it in a situation like this where Alicent and her father especially, has been hell-bent on proximity to, access to, and control of the Iron Throne. This is another way of doing it, right? Where who knows what's taken place over these 6 years, and it's never really been explained what exactly this ailment is that Viserys is suffering from. But with them giving him milk of the poppy, and him being in bed and he can't really do anything, it's like, is this something that's helping him? Or is this something that they could potentially be using to control him or to incapacitate him? You know, and when Alicent arrives, Daemon pretty much expresses that, you know, in that putting whatever drama between him and Viserys aside, that's still his brother. You know, that's still Rhaenyra's father. And so there would be some concern, as you do stand to gain quite a bit. And this goes back to, if you think of the earlier episode where Viserys let Hightower go as Hand of the King because he was operating in his own best interest. We see that Alicent can be very cutthroat. We see that her father is a wheeler dealer and willing to do things to advance his own preferences and interests. And we see also that, you know, the people they surround themselves with, if you think of Larys, that they're willing to do what they have to do to get what they want. It kind of calls into question this situation with Viserys. You know, like, are they operating in his best interest, or are they taking advantage of the situation, making the situation worse so that they can maintain control over the Iron Throne? Their meeting, or reunification, if you want to call it that, is cut short by the arrival of Vaemond Velaryon, Corlys' brother. who has kind of set all of this in motion by starting this, let's say, petition for the Driftmark throne. As the various factions gather and, this meeting is going to take place to decide, well, who should rule over Driftmark and have control over the Driftmark fleet, Rhaenyra, it's like everyone's trying to get their ducks in order and get their alliances together so that they have proper support to support their claims. Rhaenyra at the same time meets up with Rhaenyra, her cousin, well, like second cousin, because it's her father's first cousin. Rhaenyra meets up with Rhaenyra to try to win her over to her side, but a huge wedge in their relationship, while they have exchanged children as wards, is that Rhaenyra believes that Rhaenyra had her son, her last surviving child, Laenor, killed to clear the pathway for her to be able to marry Daemon, not knowing that really they pretty much just set Laenor free. She does propose that, like, listen, we can work something out here. Again, this thing of proposing marriages to settle disagreements and strengthen alliances. Rhaenyra, who we wouldn't automatically consider, can also throw her hat in the ring, as Corlys is her husband, and she can theoretically, much as Alicent is doing with Hightower, rule in his place until he either returns or they get a definite answer with regards to what happened to him, that he's dead or something like that. So the night before this grand meeting where the Driftmark succession, claims would be heard, Rhaenyra goes to meet with her father once more, right, to appeal to him. I mean, I guess in some sense to spend time with him, but she also appeals to him that he also casts Rhaenyra into the fray, right? Like making her the focus of a lot of people's anger and ire. Now, here it is where you also have Driftmark coming into play, where this problem is spreading further. She goes to her father and appeals to him for help. You're the one that put me in this position. And if you still feel this way, if this is still your will, you should back me. You should do something to defend me. The Song of Fire and Ice was about keeping the family together, and he's kind of driven a wedge into things with the changes that he's made to the succession. So really, it should fall to him to kind of clean up this mess that he's made. What's interesting is that it seems that he typically stays in bed, where the Hightowers then rule in his place. He's given milk of the poppy and whatnot, but on this day, he declines the milk of the poppy and instead tells Hightower that he wants his family to gather for supper that evening. If you think of it, they haven't all been together in, 6 years? And so Viserys' thing has always been keeping the family together, right? This was also part of Rhaenyra's appeal to him, that as everyone gathers in the throne room, I found it quite telling that Hightower pretty much takes a seat on the Iron Throne. Now, you could ask, why not just do this and, get the close people that need to be present together and just take them to Viserys and, let them lay in bed and listen to it there. But instead, here you have it in the throne room. They're meeting there. They're all gathered. You have, on the one side, you have Rhaenyra, Daemon, Rhaenyra's kids, their children on the one side, and then, it looks like some common folk or whoever these people are in the background on the one side. On the other side of the aisle, you then have Vaemond Velaryon, and standing with him is Alicent and her kids, as well as Rhaenys Targaryen. And so you have a visual representation of the division between these people. And it's if Alicent, as she stated the previous day in her meeting with Daemon and Rhaenyra, that, she'll be impartial, never mind that she takes it as that they made some pretty serious accusations against her, that she'll be impartial the next day. Here you have it where she's physically standing with Vaemond. Vaemond gives some background on his family and their history, where he expresses that House Velaryon, when they came over from their ancestral land, these are like the two surviving houses that the Targaryens rule the skies because they had the dragons, and the Velaryons ruled the seas. They had their realm, the Velaryons had theirs as well. And from his perspective, his house's ancestry is important, and the continuation of his house's line, their bloodline, is important. And Rhaenyra and her children, who he does not consider to be of House Velaryon, are a threat to this. There's some back and forth and whatnot where he's kind of not necessarily dancing around the issue, but trying to be, let's say, diplomatic. And in claiming that he is the closest male relative to his brother, it's a roundabout way of stating that Rhaenyra's sons are not Laenor's children, right? That they're not any kind of kin to Corlys. And so Rhaenyra butts in, where she is then cut off by Alicent, who tells her that, she'll have her opportunity to speak. And when it seems like all hope is lost, the doors to the room open and in walks Viserys. Well, shambles, really. Shambles in Viserys. And it's with quite some effort that he makes it to the throne, right? Like, he declines help from the king's guards along the way. And in getting to the steps leading up to the throne, he kind of falters, dropping his crown, which I think is actually quite symbolic, because this man is torn up and whatnot physically, because really he wasn't supposed to be sitting on the throne, right? Like, he was not supposed to be king. And I think that's like while he's falling apart. And in stepping up to the throne, I think it's actually quite symbolic that it's such a difficult process for him to get to the throne. And when he gets to the steps of the throne, that he falters and his crown drops off. The person to help him recover and to help him the rest of the way is Daemon. You see a hand reach out and pick up the crown. And where he initially attempts to decline help, Daemon insists and helps him the rest of the way to getting seated on the throne. And then, like, the camera actually shifts, and I think it's pretty significant that Daemon places the crown on his head. Because it's like, regardless of whatever problems and difficulties they have between themselves, you always get the sense that Daemon is, like, he's there for his brother, right? Like, he's his ride or die. That's his guy. Like, he's always going, whatever problems between them, he's always going to defend his brother. And you see that here. Like, family over everything. And in taking his place back amongst the petitioners, standing beside Rhaenyra, the petition kind of continues, but with Viserys rather taking over the conversation, in that he looks at it as there's no reason for them to be for there to even be any petitions, because the succession has already been settled, right? Rhaenyra has been named as Viserys' heir, and Corlys has named Laenor as his heir, right? As it would pass, Laenor would be his heir, and given the death of Laenor, his sons, as he has sons, or children recognized as his sons, they would then be his heirs. So Viserys' thing is, I don't even know why we're having this conversation. This matter is already settled, which really sets off Vaemond. And he, it's an instance of when keeping it real goes wrong. And he pretty much comes out with it. Whereas before, he was kind of cleaning things up and dancing around the subject. Here, he states the reality of the situation from his perspective, which is that Rhaenyra's sons are bastards, that they're not his nephew's children, and that Rhaenyra, pardon my language, is a whore. Which you remember the whole situation last episode where old boy lost his eye, calling these kids bastards. Here it is that you have it being repeated, and Viserys himself actually rises and pulls out his dagger and whatnot, but he's like physically weak and frail, and calls for retribution against this man for insulting his daughter. And Daemon picks up for his brother where he can't and carries out the act, in a sense beheading Vaemond. That's a sharp sword blade, man. Not even like at the neck or anything like that. Like cutting the dude like mouth cut open, tongue still hanging, right? Like Viserys calls for Vaemond's tongue. Daemon leaves the tongue intact, but he takes like the rest of the head, like pretty much splits his head open at the mouth.
Thanks for tuning in. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, go ahead and click the thumbs up button if you like what you saw, and go ahead and share it on social media.